The lights had dimmed, the applause had faded, but their legacy lingered on, echoing in silent corners of Hollywood and the hearts of those who understood true artistry. Before cameras ever captured their genius or critics etched their names into history, there was something far more intimate shaping in Bancroft and Mel Brooks' story. Something not found in scripts or spotlights. In a city overflowing with temporary fame and short-lived love affairs, theirs was a partnership that didn't just survive. It deepened quietly, fiercely, and without performance. It wasn't about showmanship. It was about realness, about being fully seen by another person, even when the world wasn't watching. And Bancroft didn't chase Hollywood. She challenged it. Born Anna Maria Luisa Italiano in the Bronx, her upbringing in a traditional Italian-American family grounded her in values that stayed with her even as she stepped into the shimmering, complicated world of film and theater. She began as many did, with a name change, a studio suggestion to make her sound more palatable to wider audiences. But Bancroft never let herself be reduced to a label or reshaped to fit expectations. Early in her career, she stood beside stars like Marilyn Monroe, yet never allowed herself to be swallowed by the glitter. She moved toward the stage, not for attention, but for truth. Her portrayal of Annie Sullivan in The Miracle Worker didn't just win her an Academy Award and a Tony. It carved her name into the hearts of audiences who were desperate for authenticity. She wasn't acting to be adored. She was acting to be honest. In 1964, the world blinked in surprise when she married Mel Brooks. He was all chaos and comedy, the man who dared to mock dictators and reimagine cowboys in ways that left audiences laughing and gasping. She was reserved, dramatic, a storm of depth hidden behind calm eyes. On paper, they didn't match. But that's the part the tabloids never understood. It wasn't about appearances. It was about energy, balance, and a love that made no sense to outsiders yet made perfect sense to them. Their son, Max Brooks, would later become a creative force in his own right, a quiet tribute to the legacy his parents built, not through public spectacle, but through mutual support and a shared life of meaning. Mel Brooks had lived 1,000 lives before he met Anne. Raised in Brooklyn, he'd grown up fast. He was still a teenager when he entered the army during World War II. He saw enough darkness to understand the need for light, and laughter became his resistance, his shield. He moved from stand-up in the Catskills to television writing, forming a bond with Carl Reiner that would birth some of the most iconic comedy of the era. But Brooks wasn't interested in safe jokes. His humor poked where it hurt, dragged discomfort into the open, and then diffused it with audacity. The producers, his first film, dared to make Nazis the punchline, an outrageous, controversial move that won him an Oscar. It was bold, it was biting, and it was completely his. Then came Blazing Saddles, ripping into racism with such brutal honesty that some people missed the point entirely. It wasn't about being offensive, it was about holding a mirror to society's ugliness and forcing it to laugh, just to understand it better. Young Frankenstein was both a love letter to classic cinema and a reinvention of it. Spaceballs took the epic self-seriousness of sci-fi and blew it apart with silliness. With each project, Brooks proved he wasn't afraid. Not of backlash, not of failure, not even of taboo. But even he admitted later, the Broadway version of The Producers, as grand as it was, softened some of the edge. The stage needed sparkle, but Brooks never let go of the original message. That satire has power, and laughter is a weapon. While he was shaking up Hollywood with irreverent genius, and was quietly reshaping what it meant to be a woman in film. Her role as Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate became iconic, though not always in ways she appreciated. The public believed she was decades older than co-star Dustin Hoffman. In truth, she was barely 6 years older, but that one misbelief stuck, and it cost her. Hollywood began to box her in, offering roles that played into a version of her she didn't recognize. But Bancroft didn't play along. She spoke up, about aging, about invisibility, about the false ceilings women hit when their youth fades but their talent doesn't. She turned down parts that didn't respect her intelligence. She refused to be the glossy version of herself that Hollywood demanded. Even in her most visible roles, Bancroft brought layers others wouldn't dare touch. In Fatso, she wrote, directed, and starred in a story about self-image and vulnerability, decades before such topics were commonly addressed on screen. In 84 Charing Cross Road, she explored longing and connection with such grace that it felt less like acting and more like truth being spoken aloud. She was magnetic, not because she tried to be, but because she couldn't help it. And through it all, she avoided the Hollywood circus. No red carpet addiction, no thirst for interviews. She stayed grounded in her work and her home, choosing privacy over publicity. Colleagues called her disciplined. Critics called her aloof. She was neither. She was just real. Behind the curtain, their home life was filled with the kind of beauty most never saw. Brooks has said that and wasn't just his partner. She was his best critic, the person who told him when something was too much or not enough. Her insight shaped his work in ways the world didn't realize. She read every script, weighed every line, and helped him find the heart behind the humor. They weren't competing stars. They were companions who made each other better, funnier, sharper, braver. They watched old movies together. They raised their son away from the chaos. They stayed in, laughed often, and loved each other through all the noise. For Brooks, and didn't just brighten his world, she centered it. When she passed away in 2005 from uterine cancer, Mel Brooks fell silent. The man who had made the world laugh for decades suddenly had no punchline. Grief wasn't loud for him. It was quiet, deep, and respectful. Just like the relationship they had built. He didn't tour the talk shows, didn't release dramatic tributes. He waited until he was ready. In his memoir, he finally let the public in, not to dramatize, but to honor. He wrote about her brilliance, her softness, her fierce loyalty. He shared the small things, the notes she left, the advice she whispered, the way her presence changed everything. In interviews, he often says he still hears her. That she still reminds him to be kind. That her voice lives on in every decision he makes. Their love wasn't the kind Hollywood sells. It didn't need diamonds or headlines. It had bad days and harsh truths. It had fierce loyalty and earned laughter. And it lasted. That's what made it rare. That's what made it worthy of remembrance. Long after the cameras stopped rolling, and Bancroft and Mel Brooks gave the world something far more valuable than characters or scripts. They gave us a model for dignity. For humor with purpose. For love that doesn't need applause to be real. Today, Anne's legacy is being re-evaluated by new generations who recognize the risks she took, the barriers she pushed against, and the quiet strength she carried. She didn't demand the spotlight, but she illuminated every room she entered. Mel Brooks, now well into his 90s, continues to create, to reflect, and to remind us that grief doesn't have to be loud to be deep. That love doesn't end. It transforms. In his return to comedy with History of the World Part 2, you can still feel her fingerprints. Her sensibility, her wit, her encouragement echoing between the jokes. Their son Max speaks of them with reverence, not just as parents, but as creators who never stopped challenging the world. Together, they navigated an industry known for breaking people, and they did it without breaking each other. They faced sexism, typecasting, criticism, and public scrutiny, and came out with something far more meaningful than accolades. They found truth, both on the screen and in each other. And in doing so, they gave all of us a rare look at what it means to be both extraordinary and deeply human. Some names are whispered with reverence backstage long after the curtain falls, not for their fame, but for the depth of their humanity and the originality of their genius. And Bancroft and Mel Brooks are two of those names. Their story isn't perfect. It's better. It's honest. It's flawed, real, and unforgettable. And maybe, in a world still obsessed with image, that's the greatest legacy of all. If this story moved you the way it moved us, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We've got more stories coming that honor the real legends, the ones who lived with heart, stayed true to themselves, and reminded us that behind every great performance, there's a person worth knowing.